Okay, today's video is about what they call peekaboo applique. To me, it's called, I actually like to call it reverse applique because your traditional way that you do applique, where you do the placement stitch and then you put your fabric down and then you do the tack down stitch, you cut around the fabric, and then you do your finishing stitch, which is a satin stitch. Well, in the peekaboo, you really only have to do one stitch, well, two stitches, your what we would call the placement stitch, and then the finishing stitch, which in this case is going to be the satin stitch. So the first thing you would do is you would lay down your stabilizer, and then you would lay down your fabric, and this is going to be what's going to be showing after I cut out what is now my t-shirt. And I'm going to line it up about 2 inches from the top, so I'll know where to begin. I got an old t-shirt. I like to use old t-shirts because typically I am doing t-shirts, so I just cut them up. And then that's what I use for my testing. So we can bring this down because I like to keep my fabric. I can use more for testing. So we got all that there, and all the stabilizer is catching the hoop pretty good. Spreading it out. Then I'm going to put my hoop on, and I'm using the Mighty Hoop 8x13. I'm going to stretch it a little bit, not too much, because remember when you're doing t-shirts, you don't want to overstretch because of when you take it off the hoop, it's going to go back in, and that's where you're going to have puckering. So we're going to take it to the machine, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so now we're at the machine, and I know I said earlier that you could use one placement stitch, but I decided to keep the two two stitches, the beginning stitches. One is the placement stitch, and one is considered the tack down stitch in typical applique. But because I'm doing this peekaboo, I decided to go ahead and keep that second, what is called the tack down stitch, because I feel like if I cut some stitches, then it will come back and stitch down what I cut. So I'm going to keep the traditional 3 stitching, placement, tack down, and finishing. So I've already got my design hooped on the machine. There it is. I am going to do a trace. I'm already on needle 1, so I see how far up. I think I'm good in terms of because this is where my applique fabric that's underneath the garment. I have more than enough room. So then now I am going to do my placement stitch. And here we go. So I got it where it's doing all the placement stitches first. So I'm using a lavender color as a placement stitch. It's 4 letters, the N, the C, and an N, and a W. Alright, I completed the first one. Almost finished with the second one, and then I'll come back when it finishes all the placement stitches. Okay, so now you see I have my placement stitch down, and so now I need to cut out the fabric. So remember I said I'm cutting out the inside of the letters. So the t-shirt material is what's getting cut out right now. And I will be back to show you once I get it cut. So I have cut all the fabric out. So I decided to go ahead and make a t-shirt. Remember my purple fabric is what would have been my applique fabric, so I cut inside of the letters instead of around the letters the traditional way. I mean around the stitching, so I cut inside the stitching. And so the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to run that, what is now considered the tack down stitch. I'm going to run it because I did cut some of the stitching on the placement stitch. So it just kind of reinforces the fabric once again. I'll be back. Okay, so we're back at the machine, and I am going to show you the first two letters of the second stitch, which would be traditionally the placement the tack down stitch. So that's going to be in a gray color. And it's just going to do exactly what the first stitch did. It's just reinforcing the stitches from the placement. And then if any stitches are cut over, it's going to take care of those, as you can see. So finish the N. Now it's going to go do the C. And my satin stitch should cover, even if I have some, like you can see in here, I didn't cut close to the stitching, which I shouldn't. I should be leaving about 1/8 of an inch. But I like to get close as possible. So we'll be back when this finishes and start the satin stitch. Okay, so now we're gonna do the last stitch, which is the satin stitch. So again, I'm not gonna have you watch all 4 letters, but we're gonna start it and then we'll come back when it finishes. And this one's doing purple. And if I hadn't said it before, I am using, as you can see on the screen, the Smartstitch. It's a 15 needle. It is the Smartstitch S1501. I have had it, I made a year in early March, so I've had it over about a year and a month, almost, yeah, a year and a month. And I love the machine. I haven't had an opportunity to do much with it. I am one of the trainers. I do enjoy training new people on the machine. I have trained various embroidery experience from absolutely none to very seasoned embroidery people that have been embroidering for a while. So it's not a hard machine. It's just you got to take your time and understand embroidery if you are a new person. If you have been embroidering for several years, say for instance you're coming off a single needle, the only thing that you should bring with this machine is your knowledge of embroidery. Don't try to think of it's going to work just like your single needle. You have more flexibility than a single needle. And I think that's the biggest thing that people coming from single needles have to understand. So again, I love the machine. I am a trainer. So it's finishing up is zigzag stitch. I love this particular, I actually digitized this myself, so I like the stability of adding that extra zigzag stitch, so it really does hold the fabric down. One thing I forgot to tell you, when you do your fabric that you're putting, that's really your applique. I put heat and bond on the back, and this is just a sample I had already cut out, but you can see the shiny part is the heat and bond, so that when it does finish, because you have the cutaway stabilizer, you have something for it to adhere to. So when you finish, you should be either hitting this with an iron, or if you have a heat press, you should be hitting it with a heat press so that you can use the purple fabric, which you see inside the black, the purple fabric onto your stabilizer. I'm gonna let this finish with the end, and then I'll come back as it finishes up. Actually, when it finishes, and then I'll bring it off to the side and take. Okay, so here is the finished product. As you can see, there were some spots where I didn't cut close enough to the stitching, but overall, I actually like this method of applique. It's called A Boo Applique, and it turned out well. I can't get a real full shot of the t-shirt, but the lighting makes it look more lavender, but it is almost a dark purple, and I love it. Turned out really good. And I'll show you the inside. So you would take it to the heat press, because remember we put heat and bond on the fabric, so you just kind of iron it down. I left some of the fabric on the back so it would have something to adhere to. But I love it. It turned out good. Like I said, this is the finished product.